goes. Just the way it goes. Degrees.
Everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hookup on Music podcast, where tonight we are going to definitely dig deep into the London Dungeon, and I have brought with me, I want to be honest with you, the first time I seen this gentleman online, I seen something with the Misfits, and I said, you know what, this guy's cool. It is Mr. CPG, comic punk guy. Welcome back, my friend. Thank you.
Good. Glad to be here. I can't wait for this. This is going to be a good conversation, man. This is one of, there is, like I said on the Twitters, because I'm not calling it the other name, there would be no punk and comic punk guy without the Misfits. They are a huge staple in that, especially when I was a teenager getting through all the angst, man.
I'm going to double down with you that there would be no Hookup on Music podcast without the Misfits. This shirt that I am wearing here is from 1995. I accumulated this when I in 8th grade, when I was like, they were for me, they were really awesome. And we're glad you're back. We're back like Return of the Fly. So let's jump right into 1977 when the band began.
Yeah, so 1977 is Glenn Danzig's first introduction to music. Before that, he wanted to be a comic book artist for Marvel Comics, and he thought the best way of exposure or a way to make money to be able to get exposure was to join a band. So he joined a cover band in his local New Jersey called Kodong V Bunk Dank or something like that. It's fucking weird. They covered a lot of just pretty much all things that were hits during that time, like a lot of the Doors and Velvet Underground and stuff like that. And following all of that in 1977, he just says, the thing with Misfits history is that no one really knows what exactly happened. There are these huge, fantastic stories. There are people who say I was there who were never there. I was not born yet, so I definitely wasn't there. But this is the most out of all the research I did, things that I thought were important. But
before in the pre-show, when you were telling me some of this stuff, I mean, I've been listening to them since, like I said, 95, and I didn't know any of some of this stuff. So I'm pretty excited to dig into what you've come up with here. It's going to be good.
Oh yeah. So Danzig starts the Misfits, and they kind of get some traction. And it's really funny, the early Misfits stuff is that you can definitely see that Glenn's got a formula. And when he first started out, he had a little squawk box on his microphone, and he played the keyboard. And that's why I think the foundation of just about every Misfits song until probably a little bit towards the end of the Glenn Danzig era is just because that is what his keyboard made when he first started.
It's funny that you should bring that up real quick before we go any further, because when I hear this, so it's funny that you should bring it up, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and they, they got a lot of their first gigs off of that early stuff. Like Cough Cool was like their first like big, because they were pressing that themselves. Glenn was pressing it himself and really putting it out there. And this is before Jerry Only was, I think, even around. They knew each other, but didn't have. Jerry wasn't in the band yet, and he was getting really kind of serious about this type of stuff. And the CBGB shows were during that time too, where they swore that these were going to be paid gigs, and they were not. No matter what anybody tells you, no, CBGBs would not pay the Misfits it up front for anything without knowing who they were first. I don't believe Glenn's story on that, but Glenn is known to stretch the truth. So is Jerry too. You can definitely tell how the two of them are as like people who have to collaborate and interact with each other based on like interviews they give during certain eras. Like you can definitely, like there's times where Danzig won't give any of them any credit, like won't give Jerry any credit for anything. And there are times he's like, oh yeah, he came up with some pretty good stuff sometimes. And it's like, you can definitely tell when things were cool and when things really weren't cool.
Yeah. From my perspective, I definitely saw that too.
Yeah. And by the time that Jerry Only had joined Misfits, they were putting out their own stuff. Danzig came up with his own record label called Blank Records and wound up getting a cease and desist, or actually sending a cease and desist. So Danzig was threatening to sue people way before, the 80s and
Really?
later. So it's kind of funny how the thing kind of goes that way with him all the time. But Mercury Records actually started their own imprint that was supposed to be for their punk musicians and stuff, and it was going to be called Blank Records. And Mercury Records, of all people, gets a call from Glenn Danzig telling them they can't use the name anymore. And the way that they were able to basically what Mercury Records and Danzig came to agreement on was that for free studio time to record what would be like the first round of like Misfit stuff that would come out, they got to keep the name Blank Records, and that's when Danzig shifted to the Plan 9 Records, which is Plan 9 from Outer Space, right? And the Mercury was like super happy with this because they didn't have to pay anybody. They just had to give up the time, I guess, to use the studio. And the band that they want, I don't remember the name of the band they wound up picking, but it was some like artsy punk band that really wasn't like the Ramones or anything like that. It was getting big, like starting to roll out and get big during that time. And then they dissolved the record label. And then by that point, like Danzig was like, oh, Blank Records, whatever, because everything for him, it just kept on moving. But it's funny to see how all that kind of goes through that, like this just tiny man from took on Mercury Records and won, and then wound up not mattering.
Well, it's funny because, back first listening to him, I'm thinking this guy's just as massive. This guy's gonna, tall, 6'4", 6'5", just not quite like that, but that's okay.
Well, like his stature got him, the rumor, or it happened is that there was, before the 2000 X-Men movie, they were interested in casting him as Wolverine, and it was because he was a shorter guy that could, and he could, probably make himself look really fearsome and stuff. And he said that it was a disagreement or something like that about his, the take on the character that led to him not getting the role. I want to think it was because he probably can't act. But he went on, years after that, like slandering Hugh Jackman's, which is like, just, you can't do that.
No,
but of course, when his biggest gripe with Hugh Jackman's performance is that he is like 6 foot whatever in real life and not as tall as Wolverine actually is.
Yeah. I mean, that's very, very, again, just all around, Danzig is definitely unique.
He is. There are things that he's done that I'm like, God, this guy is terrible. I don't want to whatever, but it's as an artist and as the music he's like put out there. I like Danzig 1 and Danzig 2 I can listen to. Everything after that, I'm a little like, oh, okay, bud. But it's still, and Sam Hain's also good in its own right. He definitely knows what he wants to put out there, and he doesn't really care really, if the mainstream like it or not, it's his baby, it's his creative vision. And then you get things like him covering Elvis, which is awful. My ears are still bleeding.
Yeah. I remember picking up, I believe it was like in high school, Danzig 5, Black Acid Devil, and I had the t-shirt. And my mom's like, what the hell's Black Acid Devil? I'm like, it's Danzig. It's cool. But you're absolutely right. When you look back to especially the first couple albums, and then it kind of gets a little bit like, but, he's a guy who it seems to do, I think recently within the last couple of years, didn't he come out with a movie, or he's been involved with a movie too? Like,
he had a movie that he wrote or directed or something. He also directed a lot of like his own music videos and stuff. And that's why they're all weird.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like, I can't imagine this guy is Wolverine, but it's cool to dream,
Yeah. I really hope like in that Flash movie that just came out, they did a cameo of Nick Cage's Superman, who Superman lives. And I'm like, can we get that in Marvel? Can it be Glenn Danzig as Wolverine? Just give it to us like one time. Like fan service for like 35 seconds.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so like after 1977 and the Misfits kind of get rolling and doing their own thing, by 1979 they have accumulated quite a an ensemble of people. They've always had rotating drummers. They didn't really get a full-time drummer until like Arthur Googie later on, which is a wonderful name that is totally not made up. That's the man's actual name. He along with Bobby Steele make up the Misfits during this time, and one of the most popular punk venues at the time was Max's in Kansas City, and Bobby Steele wound up getting the Misfits banned for life for throwing glass bottles in the crowd during their show.
That's not gonna be good.
And the heat from that really, they got banned from there, which at that point in time, the sound carries, and people start saying, hey, these guys are not, they don't attract a really good crowd, or they're throwing glass bottles. And it's a zero tolerance stuff for that in venues back then, because you didn't really have that shift of like, this is a scene of people that will more or less put up with stuff like that. I mean, I've been in very, very small venues where things like that may happen, but they're all pretty much gone now. Like, I think probably post like 2010, they're gone for the most part, unless you're like in the middle of nowhere. But they're out. So like out of this time though, you get the first use of the Crimson Ghost as their logo, and it's synonymous with the Misfits now. There's no way that you see that and you don't think about that, or at least know that it's more so known for being associated with the band in music than it is for being like this series that ran before war commercials in movie theaters.
That's very true.
But out of all of that, and then the word of mouth, they wound up meeting the lead singer of the Damned in a bar on a show that they're at a Damned show or something in States, and they said, come over to the UK. And let's go on tour. And they said cool, and they borrowed a bunch of Jerry Only and Jerry Only's dad's money. His parents owned an X-Acto knife factory or company, or at least did at the time. And Jerry and Doyle worked in the factory to pay back the debts and stuff that the Misfits accumulated in the early days. So this leads to the Misfits going overseas to the UK, and they get there and they link up with the lead singer of the Damned, and they're like, hey, Glenn Danzig's outside of his apartment, and is like, hey, I'm downstairs, Glenn Danzig with Misfits, whatever. And they're like, who are you? Because at this point, the Misfits are an opening band. They're not, it's not what it is now. I mean, all the things that I think most of the fascination these days with the Misfits does is because they were more or less this era of Misfits, I think, is so popular because it's been inactive for so long. Yeah. And it's like this and it's very much this kind of just passion project for one guy and two guys, but one guy thinks it's just him. And so anyway, like they go to the UK, and they're supposed to get this audition to drum or to play opening for the Clash, because the Damned's not going to take them. and their drummer actually goes back to the United States before it can be held because he either ran out of money and was promised a drum set that never came, or he had a huge drug addiction and needed to go back home to get fixed. But this leads into Danzig and Bobby Steele going to see the jam at Rainbow, and they're basically like, hey, we're going to be here for like a couple of weeks. We might as well just enjoy it. So they go to see the jam at the Rainbow. And Danzig tells Bobby Steele that he thinks that this group of skinheads across the street are talking about them and that he wants to get into a fight. This is like very debatable on what actually happened. But
always the best.
Yeah, more or less. Danzig instigates most of it. And Bobby Steele wants nothing to do with it. He goes, you know what? I'm hungry. I'm going to go get something to eat. And when he comes back, Danzig has broken a glass and is sharpening a piece of glass on the concrete to make it into a shiv of some kind because he wants to go fight these skinheads. And the bouncers of the Rainbow see him and immediately grab him before he can do anything. And he's dragged kicking and screaming like a child, I'm sure. And Bobby Steele doesn't know what to do, so he throws his food at the bouncers and tries to defend Glenn. It's mostly like he woke up, or he walked up and saw this, and he was like, "What's up?" And it's like, Glenn's gone. He just got dragged away. So he, wants to, tries to help him out, and Glenn winds up going to jail. And Bobby Steele doesn't know what to do. Jerry Only is on some sort of tour of England with Sid Vicious's mother. They, for some, I don't know how, Mrs. Spungen but not Mrs. Spungen. That's Nancy's mother. Sid Vicious's mother and Jerry were very close. From what I've read, this is really out there, like, heard it through the grapevine type of history telling. Nobody really knows what's up with a lot of that, but they were very close.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird link between two bands that I wouldn't think that there would be that much of a link from, because I don't think that I don't look at Glenn Danzig and think like, I like the Sex Pistols, man. I'm like, I don't,
that's true. Neither do I.
Yeah, so he can't get a hold of Jerry, and the drummer has already left for the States. So Bobby Steele's like, I got to call the embassy to get him out. So he calls the U.S. embassy, and they're like, no, and they hang up on him. So he comes up with the genius idea of, I can't bail Glenn out because Glenn's in jail with all of our money, because Glenn always held the money during this, even though it was basically Jerry's parents' money. Glenn held on to all that. Yeah. And basically Bobby Steele goes into the police station and is like, hey, can I talk to Glenn for like 5 minutes? Like, no. He's like, can I use your phone? No. Can I use the bathroom? No. They just pretty much snub him. And he basically, after sitting there and thinking about it, comes up with the bright idea of walking in the police station and spitting in a cop's face to also get thrown in jail, so that at least him and Glenn would be together. So this is monumental decision making in the history of this.
Huge. It's huge. This is rock and roll.
Yeah, and they end up in separate cells. So while they're both waiting to basically go before a judge and see what's going on, they wind up in the same holding cell or holding tank or whatever while waiting to go see their for their court date. And from what the testimony is of whoever it is that Bobby Steele said that this place looks like a dungeon. And while they were waiting, they started tapping on stuff and humming, and then London Dungeon was born, which is one of the best Misfits songs ever.
That is a credible story to lead to that. I mean, it is one of my favorites too. It's a good one.
And they're while this is all going on, they're thinking like, we'll get out of this. We'll tour with the Clash, and We'll make some money while we're out here for 2 weeks and come back. And then none of that happened.
Yeah, well,
So
I don't remember them touring with the Clash. That
Yeah,
would
yeah.
have been awesome. You tell me about the concert.
early Misfits and the Clash. That would have been just, you would have been so hyped, and then you would have just like mellowed out just enough, and then would have been brought right back up again as soon as like, you know, the bangers start going up. But you basically go to the UK on someone else's money. You don't make any money while you're there, and you play one show that you're not paid for. And you don't get the big audition. And that was kind of that was the most, I mean, other than the drummer, that was pretty much that iteration of the band that kind of produced all that stuff during then was Bobby Steele. And the things that, like, as time keeps moving along, Bobby Steele and Glenn don't get along anymore, and Bobby Steele gets let go, and Doyle von Frankenstein arrives, which is Jerry's younger brother, who is bigger than Jerry, much bigger than Jerry. Even Jerry at his biggest and his buffest wasn't not even close.
No.
Yeah.
Doyle's on those muscle magazines. I've seen him on there a couple times, like his wife too. Like they both are real big weightlifters. Oh yeah.
And yeah, so like at this point, Bobby Steele's kind of let go, and they bring in Doyle, and it's probably like this era is what people probably like the most. I like kind of in between. I mean, I like everything, but like there's a lot of this is like the essential lineup. It's going to be Arthur Googie is great. I don't think they had Robo just yet, because I don't know.
Another awesome name.
Yeah. I don't know if Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig had met yet for that to happen. But if we fast forward to like 1982, the Misfits are playing in San Francisco at what is now the Fillmore. And they chose, their opening band was the Meat Puppets, which they're known for Nirvana covering them for their Unplugged series.
Lake of Fire and stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like early Meat Puppets doesn't sound like Meat Puppets did at that point. It's much more raw and kind of fits like a band that you would see playing on the same, you know, marquee as the Misfits. I shouldn't say marquee, on a flyer duct taped to a phone pole.
There you go.
So the San Francisco crowd hates the Meat Puppets, and they are not here for any of their type of music. They're just, because it had more of a country kind of feel on it, and it really didn't sit well with them. And once they were gone, this crowd's already riled up and already not having a good time. And then the curtain comes up on like giant pumpkins and like this basically Halloween costume of a band. And like they hate it, and they just start throwing anything they can get their hands on at the Misfits on stage. And it's really bad. From like everything, all the like the interviews that I read about it, and what like the kind of testimonials or or made up stories, whichever they want to be, about people that said that they were there or around it or whatever, have said that was probably one of the worst like crowd reactions or instances of throwing stuff at bands that were actively playing. And they tried, because their whole thing was like, we'll sit there and take this, but we're not going to not play. Yeah. And then Arthur Googie gets hit in the face with an unopened can of beer. And this happens to a lot of them. Like, I think everybody but Glenn has been hit with an unopened can of beer in some fashion during this era.
Ouch.
And like, yeah, there's no way that's fun. Like my brother openly like makes the joke about throwing an unopened can of Coke at like Sugar Ray if they were playing at the Lincoln Park. But like I would like that had to hurt so bad. So at that point, Arthur Googie says fuck it and jumps in the crowd and starts fighting everybody that he can. He gets rescued by their personal bouncer or no, that's not their bouncer, their road guy, because I believe that he was another one of Doyle and Jerry's brothers. I can't remember what the connection was there, but he like saves him because like Arthur Googie's like 100-pound soaking wet. I mean, they all are at this point. Glenn's probably like 120, but like still in really good shape back then. And Glenn then decides to go on an absolute homophobic rant in San Francisco. And like in San Francisco, you do not do that. You just don't.
No, you don't do it anywhere, but definitely not there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that scene to this day, from what I've heard from people who've lived there or from books and stuff, is that like if you bring that type of energy, they are going to beat the shit out of you. And then so Glenn goes off on this rant, and it really, really makes things worse. Arthur Googie's already fighting people in the crowd, and then Doyle gets a beer, unopened beer, straight to the face and breaks his nose. So Doyle does what any normal, sane human being who definitely isn't on steroids would do, and takes his guitar and just smashes it over the closest person's head. Now Doyle was probably 17 when that happened. I think had to be 16 or 17 because he never got charged for it ever. So he had to be a minor for that to actually like pan out the way that it did. And
this whole thing sounds like a green hell.
Yeah.
But that's I didn't even know about that. That's nuts. That's
the poor guy the kid was 14 years old, and they were for years after he had like sustained like trauma from that, and they were picking pieces of guitar out of its head for years after that. Yeah, that's gotta suck so bad. So with Glenn Danzig and the homophobic comments and stuff, which is it was a break, like it's a break. It got to be a breaking point with me with him for a bit, because as I got older and wiser and a little bit more worldly, I was like, nah, fuck this guy. And like in public interviews immediately after the fact and up until probably the reunion, if that happened, he publicly doubled down on it really bad after the fact, and kind of kept basically punching down and being an absolute prick. But when he was on tour with Sam Hain, he was going to play in San Francisco, and the manager of the venue at that point said, no, not this guy, not any of his bands, not anyone that we might know, not this, no way. And I guess Glenn took him down to the river and like had a beer with him and was like, look, dude, we were kids and it was like the worst day of our lives and we didn't know anything better at the time. And he like at least apologized for it publicly. Mr. Henry, please get down. This is Henry, by the way.
That's Henry, which we were going to talk about in a little while, named after the man, Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, he privately apologized for it. Jerry Only also said if a Misfits reunion ever were to happen, Glenn would have to leave all that behind. And I don't know if publicly apologize is what that meant, but whatever the conversation they had, they eventually did get back together and did that first run of shows. So that's kind of like where I at least like to think that Glenn's a different person when it comes to all that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't really think. I mean, and I'll be really honest with you, just the way that I see things. I'm hoping. He gave an apology, but you don't hear. I didn't ever heard any of this. That's what's awesome about this episode. I mean, that's a lot of in-depth stuff that someone might not know about Glenn, and apologizing for it is definitely the right step, right?
Yeah. I would like to think that I know from some of the stuff that I'd heard and research that he had at least privately apologized for it to again, maybe at the betterment of Sam Hain at the time, so that he did, be able to go out and at least I think that Glenn's always been walking in the middle of things politically. So I'm thinking that hopefully he came around on stuff like that and he isn't a hateful person, but who knows?
That's all we could hope for
Right.
old Glenn.
Right.
You know?
So after this riot basically happens, they get rushed to the green room where they basically stay there for hours because there are people outside the venue who want to kick their ass. And then after that, Arthur Googie departs the Misfits in a McDonald's.
Oh, bye, Hamburglar.
Yeah, so they are all eating in a McDonald's, and Arthur Googie wants another cheeseburger, and Glenn says, "No way, we're not spending any more money than we have to." And Jerry says, "Let him have another cheeseburger." And he's like, "No, we can't do it." He goes, "It's my dad's money. Give him a fucking cheeseburger." And Glenn just said, "No way," wouldn't let him do it. And Arthur Googie said, "Cool, I'm done." And that's how he left. He left the Misfits. This iteration of Misfits broke up in a McDonald's.
Boo.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's more like Glenn Danzig is hard-headed. He really, I think to this day, he really truly believes that this is his thing. I mean, even on Spotify, if you look up the Misfits, it's Misfits, Glenn Danzig, and that's because he could get paid twice for the rights for everything. Sir, get down. And it's nuts. It's some of the aggressive ownership he takes to some of this stuff is mind-numbing, especially in some of the interviews where he drags everyone that put the sound behind him.
I mean, in '95 when I came across and started listening to him, I mean, the rumors of these are the 8th grade kids saying, "Oh, these guys would never get back together." You know what I'm saying? And so there's rumors that, Jerry went to Glenn's front door and Glenn punched him out when asking him, or didn't answer the door. And you're like, is any of this true? Is it not true?
But it's hard. It's hard with that because I've seen Glenn Danzig get knocked to his ass by being slapped by somebody.
That's what I wanted to talk about. When we got out earlier, is that I've seen that video too, and it's like the reality versus, like you said. I mean, is he just a tough guy to work with? And we got lucky that we got some pretty good music out of him because he's pretty tough to work with. I mean, just their all around vibe, the things they wrote about were all different to every other punk band that I listened to or have listened to. Like if you listen to Minor Threat and then you listen to Misfits, that's a completely different world.
Oh yeah.
The Clash, as you said, I mean, pretty much any punk band. Yeah,
and I think with the Misfits is that the horror punk thing really, I mean, other than the Cramps, there really wasn't anything big out there that kind of went in that direction. And I think with the imagery, I mean, the Misfits is essentially a costume. It's a Halloween costume. It is the Monster Mash directed by Rob Zombie. You know what I mean? It's really, this more so performance thing than it is, I think, the way that everything kind of rolled for them is that there just really wasn't anything like it. Like even the more Ramones-ish songs that they had put out, and there's only one of a Horror Business, I think, is the only thing that sounds remotely like Ramones or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how they, did their thing. So they were unique enough and niche enough at the time. And, this explosion of popularity doesn't really come without the story of, this is a crazy band that did crazy stuff. There was riots at their shows and then they just stopped.
Yeah. I mean, that's the stories make it seem like they had this big Kiss-like career where they're playing stadiums, but as you stated, bottles being thrown, small clubs. It wasn't like they were topping off at huge venues when they stopped. That's what's kind of crazy that that they get back together, and then they're doing big arenas, or now they're doing big festivals and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing too, is that at this point, this is when they are probably at their most popular and probably at their most they're getting the traction, and then it all just falls apart because Googie quits, and then because of the San Francisco. Sir, hold on. I'm sorry. he is all over the place. Because of the San Francisco riot gig, they get blacklisted. No one will get these. It's taken very seriously amongst venues. You're getting closer to. I mean, you're in '82, but you're getting closer to like venues very much communicating with each other, and these stories of this happening here and this happening there are really more circulated. And they go on one last tour with Necros and the Young Aborigines. And the Young Aborigines are interesting to me because the Young Aborigines were a hardcore band that was pretty good, but they meshed way better when they became the Beastie Boys.
Look at that.
So it's a cool kind of like another band that shouldn't be connected at all. That is.
That had a little time together. That's pretty cool. Another awesome thing that I did not know.
Yeah, and then like if you look at Young Aborigines, the closest thing that Beastie Boys I think ever did was Tough Guy. Tough Guy is like probably an old Young Aborigines song that got redone, reprocessed, actually thought through and put out. Because like Tough Guy is my favorite Beastie Boys song because it's a hardcore punk song. It's like it fits all that. They go on this tour though, and while they're at their one of their second or third or fourth to last shows ever in this original lineup with a drummer that they basically pulled in who got hammered before the show out of being nervous. Bobby Steele is in the rafters and he is throwing unopened cans of beer at all of them. And it is pretty much done after that. Bobby Steele got taken out by the private bouncer, and it just reignites all this, turmoil with all of them. And shortly after that, after Glenn had to sit in the backseat of a car with Doyle and Jerry driving, pissed off that this even happened, and the drunk drummer recovering next to Glenn because this is Glenn's handpicked guy. They play one last show, and both of them, Jerry and Glenn, I guess at some points to say this is it. This is the last Misfits show ever. Sam Hain was already in the chamber for Glenn. I think he was already putting that together at that time. And he was like, oh, what's tougher than punk? Oh, it's metal. That's what I want to go with. And Sam Hain was very quickly after that. And then come the custody battle over the Crimson Ghost between Jerry and Glenn, and then kind of really figuring out who really gets to own the Misfits and who doesn't. I think the original, like the way that I should ask Celeste because she's a lawyer, but like the way the legal way of looking at it, as I believe, like Glenn gets 40% of anything that's got the Misfits on it that comes out through like any of the records and stuff that get put out, whether it's a legacy compilation or anything that sells. Jerry and Doyle were ruled to get 60% of that, split 30-30 amongst them. And I think Arthur Googie and one of the other drummers may get something, or they took a lump sum or something during all that, and then they were like, hey, we're out. But it also granted Glenn and Jerry and Doyle license agreement for all of their merchandise. So like if you want to if Glenn Danzig wants to put out a pacifier with the Misfits logo on it, 100% of that proceeds goes to him. But if Jerry and Doyle put out their own that's a different color, they get all the proceeds from that one. And that's why there's so much crazy Misfit stuff out there, because this was the moneymaker, I think, for them in between. I mean, Danzig 1 by that point, and had Sam Hain had already kind of done their thing, and it was making money in their group of fans and stuff. And but the most important thing that came out of that is that like the rights to the Misfits as a band fell to Jerry and Glenn, and then that's how you get to the Michael Graves era of Misfits, which I'm very interested to know what you think of that before I get into it.
Well, let's rewind back to, like I said, I'm this band in 95. I mean, 96. They're awesome. As you stated, all these stories, these songs. I mean, I start to play the guitar. This is the first song I learned. I think it's the only song I still can play on the guitar. and so at this moment, at that young age, all I heard were some fun. But then they're coming back. So American Psycho, the first album that they come back with, I actually really liked that album a lot when it came out. I did not like Famous Monster, the next album after that one, but I had a good friend who did and liked American Psycho, but it had more of a little bit of a metal edge than it did the old style, even though you could feel it. It's there, but especially the American Psycho album, I can stand by for the time it came out. Today on my walk, Dig Up Her Bones is actually a really awesome song. I mean, it pretty much holds up still. I hadn't listened to it in a long time, but it kind of reminds me again, as you were stating earlier, some Ramones, like Pet Sematary, something you can mix in there, but it's not the Glenn Danzig era. So it's something completely different. What do you think?
So when I initially had gotten into the Misfits, it was through like a compilation set that didn't have any of this stuff on it. I knew that there was I knew that the Misfits at some point had a different singer, and I only knew that because of WCW, but I didn't listen to any of it. And one of my best friends from high school, he's a huge Misfits fan, but I didn't know that it was the Michael Graves era that he prefers as a person. So I just like, hey, I'm going to give this a listen. I liked American Psycho a lot. I loved Famous Monsters.
See, I got to listen to it again. My opinion of it is from 1997 or 98. And like, if I'm loving American Psycho still, I'm sure I'm going to like Famous Monsters. So you even saying that, I'm definitely going to dig back into it.
It's like Dig Up Her Bones, Helena, Scream. It's fantastic. And Forbidden Zone I really like because it's just goofy. It's very much like Plan 9 from Outer Space was a song. It's just like this weird, they talk about Planet of the Apes in it and stuff like that. They really just go whole hog on the camp after that. I have in that time turned into someone that now Michael Graves, terrible person. Terrible.
Oh, he is.
He is a huge piece of shit. Probably bigger than Glenn Danzig in many respects.
When you, I think it was earlier when we first started talking about this, you had brought him up. And then I started doing, because I remember a little bit, but yeah, he's really bad.
Yeah. But this era of Misfits is good in its own right. It's better than like Jerry fronting Misfits, in my opinion. I don't think that he's that guy.
That's kind of a weird incarnation when Jerry's, I don't know if I like that too much, but
yeah, it is. It's very, it all feels different. And Jerry, before moving forward and doing stuff with Michael Graves, they knew Michael Graves. They taught him the songs that they wanted to play. And originally for this iteration of Misfits, the lead singer of Typo Negative was supposed to be their lead singer. That's who they wanted.
Pete Steele, really?
Yeah, Pete Steele. And while Pete Steele was auditioning and learning the songs that Michael Graves at that point was teaching him, he told Jerry and Doyle, you don't want me, you want this guy. Yeah. This guy is the sound that you're looking for. This guy can sing the songs how you want them to sound. I either don't or can't. So here you go. And I really think that era of Misfits deserves the same chance that anyone takes when they first pick up the Misfits for the first time and have never heard them. It's a different band. It's more of a groovy metal type of thing. It's very campy, but it's not. I don't think that there needs to be the Hagar, David Lee Roth thing with these two, with Glenn and Michael Graves. And the only person who really propagates that is Michael Graves, that wants people to do that because he, wants to probably collaborate or do something. But I think the ship sailed for him with how much of a piece of shit he's been.
Yeah.
And the Michael Graves era, though, gave us all the stuff at WCW. they came out with Vampiro and stuff like that, and that was huge. It's funny listening to wrestling announcers try to describe them when they were just talking about a guy dressed as a Minotaur and whatever, but they can't describe what the Misfits look like with Vampiro. And
I was a WCW guy during that time period, so I remember everything that you're saying.
And they were really wrestling.
Yeah,
like Doyle too. I mean, Doyle was in a cage match with like people and stuff like it's nuts what those guys were able to do. And I remember reading in one of the interviews that like there was a point where Jerry and Doyle were just going to do this. They were just going to. It was going to be them and Vampiro were going to be this Misfit stable, and then we were going to be done with music, and they were just going to do wrestling. And then when they at a Misfit show. They basically get told that there's a very angry gentleman at the front of the door that really wants to talk to Doyle, and it's Macho Man Randy Savage, because Doyle was running around with his girlfriend at the time, and Savage is at the side of the stage, and he is basically like, "Where's Doyle?" And he. That was bound to happen at some point. Sorry. But Michael Graves thinks, as the show is, going on, that everything's cool. Like, I'm not Doyle. I'm not doing this to you. So he goes to talk to Savage, and Savage picks him up and slams him up against the wall. And it's like, "Where's Doyle?" And Doyle sees this from the stage looking out and books it through the crowd. Like, gave his guitar to somebody and ran out the venue and jumped in a cab and left.
That's hilarious.
And that's kind of like where all my cool stories end on all my little research I did for this one. But that was kind of like, those are the things that stood out to me. And it really kind of paints this big picture, I think, of these like 4 moments in time rather, and kind of key big things that happen with them.
After feeling this is how I feel right now.
Can I go out and kill tonight?
Man, I love that song so much. But that's lots of awesome stories. I mean, those generally, can shape, those shape the band, man. And you go through. I had you come up with a little 14 song list that if the Misfits only released one album, and what would be the songs on that album? What did you come up with?
So I wanted to go from I went all over the place, but I wanted the very first song and the very last song to encapsulate the beginning and the end. So for the first song, I did "Cough Cool." That's awesome. That's it. After that, I went with "She," because that's another one that I think every single time I've hit shuffle on a Misfits playlist ever, that always just plays for some reason.
Legacy of Brutality was the first CD that I had by them, so that's an awesome one.
Oh yeah. Then I went with "Static Age," which is real fun. And Astro Zombies. I did "Horror Business." I did "Scream," which is from the Michael Graves era.
Cool.
"Teenagers from Mars," "Halloween," "Skulls," "Dig Up Her Bones." Man, I love that song.
In school, I don't know why we would say it, but we would just keep singing the lyrics of Halloween. Dead bodies hanging from poles. I remember Halloween. It's just like such an awesome, cool lyric. But go on.
I was at I was seeing my friend's band, and I was in Lafayette, Indiana, and I think I had consumed an otherworldly amount of beer at that point, and they covered Skulls in their set, and then I covered Skulls in their set, and I didn't even know I was doing it. So I like that one a lot. So I did "Dig Up Her Bones," and then to kind of finish off with 4 strong ones, I did "Last Caress," "London Dungeon," "We Are 138," and then to encapsulate the end of the Misfits, or at least that era, it was "Die, Die, Die, My Darling."
Oh yeah.
Because to get to after the Misfits, they had to die, and that song is on that album.
That is absolutely true. Another introduction, of course, because I listened to them before I listened to them, was Metallica. And Metallica's version of is the song that just made your album. And those lyrics at the beginning of that song, again, as a young, you're like, wow, this is
Edgy.
this is like, this is just as crazy as some of these other songs we talk about that I shouldn't be listening to. It's awesome. I love it. Die, Die, My Darling, Green Hell, they've done covers of them, but I mean, the Misfits, I mean, the way, as you stated already, they were able to intertwine the horror lyrics, honestly, just a good time. A lot of those stories doesn't really make you feel the good time that I feel I have when I listen to those songs. Like, it doesn't make me ever really feel down. It really makes me kind of like pumps me up, gets me ready to go. Always good.
That's definitely true. Like, there's not, I mean, until you get to like Michael Graves era, there's no like downer Misfit songs.
No.
There's none. Unless you get to like Saturday Night, that's sad. It's sappy. It's doo-wop at that point. But there's none of this stuff that these guys have done. And and the Metallica rub for that, what was it, the $1.39 EP or whatever, before it was, so that they could sell it for that. You have the Last Caress and Green Hell mashup that they did. And that just, because Metallica at that point was huge. Black Album had come out, like, they're everywhere because they're on the radio like religiously at that point. And you get the rub from Metallica, so this brings an entirely new fan base to the Misfits, and I think that's part of their like resurgence really came from that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And then at the height of their respective careers, Guns N' Roses covers Attitude, because of course, out of every song they could possibly, that's got to be that one, right? So like, they cover Attitude, and then you get like that section of music fans, and then all of a sudden, okay, everyone's listening to Misfits now, So it's an interesting rub.
They were able to, again, that's the expansion over multiple. Still to this day, I think for me personally, you can mix them in. I mean, if you like, because they got a little bit of that 50s rock to it, a little bit too. It is punk, yes. But it's also, I think, a little bit more too, and a little bit exactly what punk is. It's a little bit of it all.
I think you get like a lot of that comes from, a lot of these like punk singers, especially early ones, they can't sing. Danzig can.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what lends a lot to it. Now, Danzig thinks that he sounds like Elvis, but he sounds like Roy Orbison, which is not a knock. It's not a knock.
No, it's not.
And that's kind of like, I think, where it
I like that.
over.
I've never heard that before. That's probably one of another favorite thing from this episode. That's awesome. Roy Orbison. I like that.
Yeah. You can kind of hear it. And that's why, I don't think that Glenn Danzig is an untalented person. I just think that he is very set on a specific vision and will not. And it really, the Michael Graves era Misfits, which, I think proves that Jerry was a creative person during all that. Because Glenn, in some interviews, claims that Jerry never contributed anything creatively. I think that's bullshit. You can see by the time that Earth AD comes out, Jerry can actually play bass now. And after Misfits, him and Doyle, it might have been Doyle, were in a band called Christ the Conqueror, and it was like KRYST, and it was a Christian Viking metal band, and it sounds like Michael Graves' era Misfits. And you see this kind of groovy metal thing kind of starting with them, and I think that it proves that Misfits, if the Misfits had never broken up, you probably could have had this really, you could have gotten the metal edge that Danzig was looking for in Samhain. You could have gotten something like that if he would just have let Jerry only be more creative.
Yeah, that's
musically.
Control seems to be the main kicker in all of this. But again, I'll always remember all those names. Jerry Only, Doyle, Danzig. These names have been in my head when I should be, even back in school, should have been remembering schoolwork. And these songs too. I mean, you just say that word, horror business, and I'm ready to start singing it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's those collections, back there on your wall. You got collection 1, collection 2. loaded with good stuff that I think, at this point, you really, if you haven't dug even deeper, people need to dig even deeper into their catalog. Even the Michael Graves stuff, like we said, really, really good.
Yeah, and even like Devil's Reign, I think was the last one. I think it was Jerry was singing on that one, or they had somebody else. I can't remember. As long as it's not the one with all the covers on it, that one's bad. But like
that was not good.
Devil's Reign is bad, but it's not bad for the reasons you think it is. It's just like it's missing something, and I think that like Jerry needs someone to kind of like there's the edginess of Danzig's like lyrical delivery you don't get with Michael Graves. You go full camp with him.
Yeah, that's true.
And with Danzig, you have like, all of this stuff that's really horrific. I mean, like I didn't put Bullet on here because I'm an adult, but like it's, Bullet is disgusting. That shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like listening to Bullet in 2023, you're just like, oh my God. When I was like 16 or, 14.
I'm gonna, it's funny because out of all the songs I researched for this, that wasn't one that I listened to. So it's been a long time now. I'm gonna have to read the lyrics because you said I'm an adult now. I like that.
Bad. It's not like, they're like as a 14 to 16-year-old, I know every single word to them. I probably still do if I really tried hard.
Talking to someone who had the post, I had the Bullet poster up on my wall, but like I had to take like a magazine, like a metal magazine, other insert, and put it over like the blood part, so it just looked like Kennedy on my wall. My mom's like, "You're not having that up on your wall," but you're right. It's
He's just sleeping. He's just sleeping.
It's you're right. You're right. There's so much stuff, man. I really appreciate you joining me tonight with all of
that. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any sort of like deep dive like this you want to do for a band, just shoot them, and I will sit there and do it with you because like
you
this
too. You got something. This isn't. That's why I love doing this. This isn't like you could be like, I want to do Weird Al Yankovic, and I'd be like, all right, let's do it. Like there's nothing that I won't dig deep in, or if I hadn't already, and do this because learning stuff and going deeper. That's one of my favorite things to do on here, and you're doing an awesome job, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much, Comic Punk Guy. And you got you and Brian. How you want to share what you guys got coming up tomorrow?
Yeah, we're doing AEW Dynamite on playback. We're starting our march towards All In and All Out. So there's going to be a lot of stuff developing there. I wouldn't miss that any of those either. There are a lot of stuff's going on. A lot of matches are getting built. The card for the big one in Wembley is not even done yet. So we got a lot of cool stuff probably going on in the next couple weeks.
Awesome. You can always check me out at the Hookup on Music. We are on Twitter. We are on Spotify. You can check me out if you'd like to talk at the Sugar Baggie. You can always drop DMs if you got any awesome bands that you'd like to talk in depth with, like we did tonight with the Misfits. It is always a good time to share and talk music with everyone out there. It is always awesome. Please check out everything that is going on the Sadistic Penguin Studios network. So many awesome things. Everyone who is involved really puts in a lot of hard work. Really appreciate everyone watching this show. And until the next time when we see each other, everyone out there, I want you to go to the London Dungeon and, we are 138. Everyone, take care.